Hello, and welcome back to the Burnt Pancakes Podcast. I am your host, Katie Fenske, and like always, I am here to remind moms that everyone burns their first pancake. Today's conversation is a solo podcast. I have had this one kind of on my mind for a while, and I have a little break in between interviews, and I thought, let's throw in a little solo. This one came about because I posted something on my Instagram stories, just like a fun fact about myself. And I had quite a few people reach out to me and say, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know that about you. Oh, wow, that's so cool." And I was kind of taken aback because I was like, "Oh, like I didn't think this was like that crazy of a thing to share." But I started realizing like I don't really put myself out there or share a whole lot about my personal life too much, other than I'm a mom. These are my crazy kids. So I thought it'd be fun to do an episode of things you might not know about me. Because, we're besties here and it's good for me to share about myself. At first, I thought, am I like being kind of arrogant, like just tooting my own horn or I don't know. But I thought this would be a good way for you to get to know me and some things you don't know about me. So, the first thing is what came up on social media. I had posted, I don't even know why I posted this, but I shared that I rowed in college. So I was on the crew team in college for 4 years. And a bunch of people were surprised by that. I went to a small school. It was Chapman University in Orange, California. It's a small Division 3 school, and my sister she was there before me, and she was on the crew team. So having played basketball in high school, I mean, I wasn't, let's say, the most athletic, coordinated person. I was okay, but I loved the social aspect of it, and I loved like working out. So when I got to college, I thought my sister was already on the crew team, and I thought, oh, this would be fun. Number one, you don't have to have any experience to join the team. Because we were at a smaller school, pretty much everyone made the team. But I got really into it and I did it for all 4 years I was there. When people ask me about it, I will say it was the absolute toughest thing I have done physically, aside from giving birth. Like that was one of the jokes we had when we were rowing. We're like, man, if we can get through this race, childbirth is going to be nothing. Little did we know it's not the same, but it is one of the most intense workouts you can do. The actual race is 2,000 meters, which is like, depending on the tides, the water, the wind, like 6 to 8 minutes, but it's like sprinting for 6 to 8 minutes. It is the most difficult thing I've done physically as a sport or working out. But it's also like the coolest thing. We would practice in Newport Beach. So every morning at 6 o'clock, as a college student, I had to get my butt down to Newport, which was like probably like 20-ish minute drive. Um, so that made, college nightlife real exciting for me that I had to get up so early, 6 days a week. But yeah, you got to be on the water when the sun came up. And I mean, we live in California, so our weather is pretty great all year round. I mean, it rained a little bit on us, but for the most part, we weren't like in freezing weather. It's a great team sport because you literally have to work together as a team. Um, for anyone who knows anything about rowing, I was the stroke seat. So I was seat 8, the person kind of like in the front or the beginning of the boat where everyone faces that kind of sets the pace and how many strokes per minute you were doing. And my sister was right behind me in seat 7. So we were the stern pair. So that was kind of fun for my parents. And I like to, have us together for 2 years. And then she graduated. Um, but yeah, it was a great experience. People who are in rowing love to talk about rowing. I read a book recently. Oh my gosh, what was I reading? Um, my friends and I were reading, oh gosh, I can't even remember what book it was now. Oh, I remember Lessons in Chemistry. In the book Lessons in Chemistry, the male character is a rower and it's really funny because they talk about people who row love to talk about rowing to people who know nothing about rowing, and then they name all these terms and these things, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I know what that is. I know what that. Oh, catching a crab. Oh yeah, I know that." And then I'm like, yeah, no one knows what that means. And they really don't care when I bring it up. But one thing about rowing is you do get blisters on your hands really bad. Um, just from holding the oar and the oar moving in your hand, where you literally will have blisters on all of your fingers. And then your blisters pop and your hands get all peely. It's disgusting. Well, I remember I was sitting in class one day, and this guy looked at me and he goes, "Oh my gosh, do you work in construction?" And I was like, "What?" No. He's like, "Oh, your hands, they're all callousy." And I was like, "Oh, maybe we should not show those." Yeah. Anyways, rowing was a great experience. I love doing it. It's probably why I still get up early in the morning to work out, because I'm just so used to like morning workouts. I do not have any desire to go on a rowing machine. So when we were practicing, we would go out on the water for most days, because California, like, we could pretty much year round be on the water. But I think it was like every Wednesday or something, our coach would make us do a erg test, where you'd have to get on and do a 2,000-meter race. And every week, you're trying to PR, you're trying to get your score down. And I just remember like butterflies in my stomach, knots in my stomach on the way to practice on the days you had to do this, because you just knew sitting on that machine, you're like, this is going to suck. This is going to be so hard for the next 8 minutes. I did get my PR below 7 or below 8. So it was like 750 or something. But anyways, I have not had any desire to go on a rowing machine since being in college. I did a little bit when I did a boot camp, but it did bring back some very exhausting memories. But anyways, most people don't realize that I rowed in college. And if you ever have a chance to do it, it's an awesome sport. Okay, another thing that you may or may not know about me, if you've listened to the podcast for a while, you've heard me talk about it a little bit, but I was a teacher for 17 years before giving it all up, leaving. So I started off, I was 23, I think, 2004, when I got my very first teaching job. That's what I went to school for. My very first job, I took over for a teacher who was leaving to do like another assignment at the school. And I had a 3-4 combo class as a first year teacher. And not only is first year teaching hard, but having a combo is crazy. I don't know why anyone would allow a new teacher to do that. Um, my oldest son right now is in a combo. He's in a 5-6. And I remember at back to school night, and she was talking about how she tries to do a lot of stuff together with both the 5th and 6th grade, but for a lot of it, like the curriculum separate. And I just remember looking at her thinking, it is so much work. Like, you're literally teaching 2 classes. But I made it through that year. I taught for 5 years at a public school, every year being changed grades, changing classrooms. And by that last year, it was at the point where, hey, it's summertime and we still don't know if we have a job for you. Like, all of us temporary teachers each year, we were like waiting it out, seeing like, should we pack up our stuff? Should we go? So at that point, I was so tired of um, not really having job security. I did get to go back every year. And if I had stuck it out, I might have been able to get my job back, but it was just exhausting doing that. And then seeing all these like tenured teachers who have been there, 15, 20 years, like not working as hard as I did because I was this newer teacher trying to prove myself, being able to keep their jobs. So I switched at that point and I went to a private Catholic school, which was awesome because I got to teach 4th grade every year I was there. So I didn't have to switch grades. I actually love, love, love 4th grade. That was my favorite thing to teach. So I taught there for the next 6 years. That's where I taught when I got married. I met some awesome friends there. Um, I had Ronin while I was teaching there. And so I had him in April. I was able to take, the maternity leave off through summer, had to come back that August, which was brutal. So for anyone who has kids and you go back to work after having like your first baby, another baby, it is so hard. Like, it was not only hard on me, um, just like physically, because you're not getting sleep. I was pumping at the time. I just did not want to be there anymore. I wanted to be with my 4-month-old baby, and dropping him off at daycare, or like my aunt watched him a couple days a week, just hurt my soul, because I just felt like I've wanted to be a mom all my life. And now I'm leaving him. and doing this job, which at that point I kind of knew like something's going to change, but we also need an income. So that was when I like got really into the law of attraction and manifesting and vision boards. And I literally put on my vision board that year, I love my part-time job. I work from home. I put the salary that I was currently making. Um, and I think I wrote like, I love being a stay-at-home mom. And no joke, in like December of that year, I was talking to someone about their teaching job, and she told me about her independent study charter school job. So basically, a public school for kids that are homeschooled was a thing. And I had never heard about it before, but I was like, please tell me more and how do I get hired? So, long story short, I applied for the job, I got hired. And then in the spring, like at the end of that year, so Ronin turned 1 in April. At the end of that year, I put in my notice to my school at the time. And I said I was leaving to do this homeschool job, homeschool charter school. And I remember leaving my classroom on the last day. I turned off the lights. I actually took a picture of myself turning off the lights saying, I am never going back to classroom teaching. It's a great job, but it's also so demanding. It is so hard for me, just like the classroom behavior and all the pressure that administration puts on you, on teachers, is just a lot. And then also add on, I don't want to be here. I want to be with my kid. I want to raise him. I want to actually feed him breakfast in the morning, not pack him up in the car at 6:30 to get to daycare. It was a lot. So I said I would never go back to classroom teaching, and I have not. So I ended up doing the homeschool charter school job for the next, what was that, 7 years? And it ended up being such a blessing, such a godsend. The first year I was there, it was very flexible. Like I had to meet with my students once a month. So we just meet at a library, a coffee shop, and go over their work, take work samples, make sure they had all the materials they need. If they needed anything, I was in charge of ordering it. It was great. It was very flexible. I felt like I had that stay-at-home part-time job, um, work from home. I was able to keep my same salary, which was incredible. So that job was great until it was not. As I kept working there, a lot of the um, responsibilities that they had for teachers was increasing, which like for good reasons. They wanted the kids to be held more accountable. They wanted to make sure they were really mastering the standards. Teachers had to like plan out more what the parents had to teach, as opposed to where it was at the beginning, where it was like they basically homeschooled and just told you what they did. So it was kind of hard to like manage the parents that had been there for a while, who were like, this is the way things were done before. Why are you making me do this? And like, now our school is telling us we have to do this. And I'm sorry, you need to get on this computer program and complete this assessment that you are totally opposed to. So it just got different. And they were going to start requiring us to teach lessons every day virtually, partly because COVID showed us that was a possibility. But there was a moment where I was like, if I continue doing this job, I won't be the one taking my son to preschool because I will have to be on my computer at that time. Um, it was hard getting childcare for those. Like I would have a full day of meetings at the library, and it felt like it was interfering with what I wanted to do as a mom. So it was in, oh gosh, 2021, at the end of 2021 or 22 is when I officially quit that job. Sometimes I look back and I think, oh my God, it was such a great job. Why did I do that? But I just say, thank you for being right for me at that time. I am now moving on to something else that is right. And I actually love the fact that my son the other day, I got a call from school. He was sick. And I said, yes, I can go pick him up because I have that flexibility. And I also do love, love, love now that I'm able to help parents, not only through the podcast, but through my potty training consultations. I just feel like this is where I'm meant to be now. I am excited because I am going to go back to the classroom and help my own kids in their classroom. I signed up to be the art master's helper for my oldest son, and I'm going to volunteer in TK. But that's about all of the classroom stuff I need. I don't really have a desire to go back to teaching. So if you are in your 40s and you want to make a career change, I say go for it. Okay. Another thing I might have mentioned on the podcast, but I haven't really talked a whole lot about is that I have had three very different births. So my oldest son, Ronin, was breech. That means he was head up. He never turned. So he was a scheduled C-section, which if anyone's ever had feelings about C-sections, I was like 100% like, I'm going to have a regular birth. That's how I am. I am a big tip woman. So why shouldn't I have that? So when the doctor told me you have to have a C-section, that's like really your only option, I was just like, no, like that's not possible. That's not going to happen. So it took me a while to like come to terms, and I'm glad I had time to prepare for the fact that I was going to have a C-section as opposed to like going into labor and then finding out like you got to do it now. So I at least had time to like research, like, how do you recover from a C-section? What can I expect? Like, what is it going to be like? But yes, Ronan was a C-section. So then when I had Jet, my middle, I had a doctor that was very pro VBAC, so vaginal birth after C-section or cesarean. She was totally fine with it, especially because I didn't like actually go into labor and then not able to have Ronan. It was just like our hands are tied, you're having a C-section. So I was able to have a VBAC with him. I went into labor naturally. It was a very, very long labor. I think I was in labor for like 36 hours. It was very long. He ended up being very hard to push out. Took about an hour and a half to get him out. I think it's because his head's so big. But he came out. I did have an epidural, but I got him out. Now, when Maverick was born, it was like, no question, like if he's not breech, we're going to go for a vaginal birth as well. He, at 41 weeks, hadn't come yet. I know my other two were born at 39. So 41 was like an eternity. I was beyond ready to have him. He did not come yet. So I was induced. So I've had a C-section, just a natural going into labor naturally, and then an induction. So I had to have that Foley ball, the Pitocin, all that stuff. But actually his was not bad either. I was able to push him out in like 2 pushes. And it actually came very quickly. So got to the hospital, got induced. By the time my water broke, that's when things like took off. It was very fast. So I wouldn't say either one is better than the other. Definitely the recovery after vaginal birth is a lot quicker than the C-section. But there are scars everywhere from the birth. So I don't know. I've experienced it all. Okay. Another thing that you may not know about me is that I do love to read. Now, I'm going to preface this with, as a child, I did not like reading. That's why, like, when I see my older son kind of like not really into books yet, he's very into like Diary of a Wimpy Kid and the graphic novels. I'm not crazy pushing it because I know like academically he's doing fine and he may pick up a passion for reading as he gets older. For me, it was in my 20s when I think I didn't have to read, I could read, that it actually became something I enjoyed doing. And now I love reading. So I think it was probably John Grisham that got me hooked on books, which is so surprising because he is like a lawyer author. Like he writes about law and judges, just courts, and something that I am not interested in at all. Like that is not something I even talk about, think about. But his books are super engaging. I don't even know why I picked up his book in the first place, but they are so, you just get hooked on them. And they're page turners for me. Anytime I'm kind of like, what should I read now? My go-to is just like pick up a John Grisham book because he has thousands and you'll be done in a couple days. But aside from that, my jam, the thing that I've really gotten into the most and like pinpointed as my genre of choice is historical fiction. So I absolutely love historical fiction, especially anything like American Revolution. I love Civil War, like slavery, reading about slavery. There's so many good books. Um, what really got me into that time period, I read America's First Daughter and My Dear Hamilton. It's by Stephanie Dray and Laura Camoy, I think is her name. Those books are fabulous. Just about the American Revolution and what women went through at that time. I also really love The Traitor's Wife by Alison Pataki. So if you're into American Revolution, those are so good. Um, Other historical fiction that I love, um, Ken Follett series. So like The Pillars of the Earth and Fall of Giants, they are the most ginormous books. They're like thousands of pages long. But again, I just get hooked on those, love them. I do remember way back, The Other Boleyn Girl, got into that one, about Henry VIII. Fascinating. So those are ones I absolutely love to read. Now, I have tried because I'm telling you, everyone loves these books, these series. I have tried A Court of Thorns and Roses, and I've tried The Fifth Wing, and I realized I don't like them. I might be the only person on the planet because everyone who's like posting on Instagram, like, I just got the new book. I can't wait. I'm like, I tried the first one of each of those series and it's just not my thing. I guess they both are considered fantasy romance, which you think would be fun. Like that sounds great. I'll read that. And I don't know. As I'm reading it, I feel like I'm too old for this. Like these people seem immature. I don't know why. So don't hate me if you love those books. I love for you that you love them because it seems so fun to get into a series like that. But I not my thing. Like I find myself like, I've got to finish this. I've got to finish this. I do, though, if I'm really not into a book, I will not finish it. So I'm not one of those that like once I start, I have to finish it. Um, I've also never gone back and reread a book. So there's been books like in the past, like I absolutely love Homegoing. That's a great book. I really enjoyed like the Da Vinci Code back in my 20s. That one was so good. But I have never reread a book. And another fun fact is I cannot get into the Kindle, the like digital books. I still have to read the physical book. Um, Love going to the library, love going to bookstores. I get a lot of my books off of Amazon, but if it's at the library, I try to get it from there. But I also feel like the panic of having to finish before the due date. Um, but anyways, if you need book recommendations, hit me up because I love reading. Okay, moving on. This is something you may not know about me, but I guarantee someone listening is going to say, yes, me too. I have hypothyroidism. So that means I have an underactive thyroid, which also means you have a slow metabolism and you have dry skin and your hair loss. Lots of fun side effects. But what I realized, so I've had this forever. I think maybe in sixth or seventh grade, maybe sixth grade, I was diagnosed, which I feel like is kind of early. My doctor noticed that they do your check on your neck, that I had a bit of a goiter, like an enlarged thyroid, and just from blood work was able to determine that I have a lazy thyroid. Doesn't want to work for me. So it's super easy fix. I just take a pill once a day. And I've been doing that since sixth grade. I was not very good about it when I was younger, but I think what got me to watch out for it is when I was childbearing years. I did hear that there's more of a chance, I think, of miscarrying, or like your thyroid hormone is supposed to help your child's brain development when you're pregnant. So I got a little more serious about that when I was trying to have kids. Um, but I mean, I don't really notice a huge difference if you don't have the right level of medication, you're going to be super tired. You're going to have trouble losing weight. And I always blame that on my thyroid. But every time I talk to my doctor, he's like, no, your numbers look great. It's probably not your thyroid why you're not losing weight. Meh. So, but I have talked to people And it seems way more common than like you would think. It's an autoimmune disease. So your like body is attacking itself, kind of like arthritis. I think diabetes is a autoimmune, which I also have that running in my family. But the thyroidism that I have is called Hashimoto. And random, I have three neighbors on my street. We all have the same thing. We all have it, which is so crazy, right? And I've never talked to a man that's had it. So I think it's a more of a female thing, but I don't know. Also, hit me up if you have hypothyroidism. We can be part of the club here. Okay, moving on. This one is about my husband. I don't talk about him that often. Not that he's not a super interesting guy. He's just more private, and this is all mom stuff. So I don't talk about him as much. But we actually met back in 2003 when I was only 22. We didn't get married until I was 29, have been married ever since. And we literally were talking the other day. So I'm about to turn, I think, okay, so I was 22 and I will be turning 44 this January. So I am almost at the point where I have known him half my life, which blows my mind because it feels like, okay, from baby, toddler, elementary school, high school, college, like that felt like such an eternity. And I'm like, that's how long I've known you? Like, how has it gone so fast? But also, like, you look back and you're like, we were children. We were kids when we knew each other, when we first met. So we met. He actually was living in Colorado and he came out to California for a summer internship. And he was living with a friend of his who was living in LA, who I went to college with. So I had just graduated from college. It was like the summer right after graduation. And the friend he was living with was friends with my good friend. And so he said, hey, we're hanging out in LA. Like, do you want to come up and hang out? So we drove up to go see them. Fun fact is we got lost on our way there. This is before cell phones. No, I did have a cell phone at the time, but before like navigation, smartphones, I don't even know if my phone was on. I did not have texting at the time. So God, I'm really aging myself here. We got lost on the way, almost turned around, but then finally figured out where we were going. And while we were there, he was like, oh, this is my buddy. He's living with me. He's from Colorado. And that's when it started. So we started dating that summer. We went on a couple dates that summer, hung out. And then at the end of summer, he went back to Colorado. And we kind of, I don't, I, I guess I can share this. When we were saying goodbye for the last time, he kissed me and then he was like, well, have a nice life. And I was like, what? Like, we dated all summer, you're leaving, and that's how you're going to end it? But little did we know we were going to continue dating. 7 years later, we were going to get married, have three beautiful children. Yes, we do have a very nice life. But we actually did do long distance for the next year and a half because he was still in college. He was finishing up school. And then after he graduated, he came and got a job out here and has been out here ever since. So we have officially been married. It's at the point where I have to think about it now. We just had our 14-year anniversary coming up on 15 this summer. We're hoping to do something big. But yeah, I have known him almost half my life. So fun story. Okay, next one. Something that I want to share because I don't think I've ever talked about this on the podcast, but I lost my dad. He passed away 3 months after I became a mom. So it was the summer of 2010. Ronin was 3 months old. And so my dad had Parkinson's. He had had it for maybe 10 years. I think it was when I was in college that he was diagnosed. A little over, probably more than 10 years. And as the years went on, it was affecting his movement. It was affecting his speech, like his mental capacity. So it was definitely taking a toll on his life. But it was the summer of 2014, sorry, 2014, when Ronan was a baby, that I got a call that he had like passed out at home. And so my mom took him to the hospital. Ended up, he had a pulmonary embolism and he passed away that day. I still, tearing up, but I still to this day, like, don't want to think about that day. Like anytime that anniversary comes up, oh, I just want to like get through it because it was awful. It was not fun losing a parent. But it was also like at the end so hard, like not a fun life for him. He couldn't do all the things that he was used to doing. So it was a blessing in disguise for him. But why I am mentioning that on the podcast, I'm sure many of you have lost one or both your parents. And that is something like you never want to think about or know what it's going to feel like until it happens. So anytime I hear of someone losing a loved one, I'm always like totally reaching out to them. It was a hard year. That was the year I went back to work. And I think part of why it was so hard was I was just going through so much with that. Hard on my mom. I like thank God every day that we had Ronin to like keep us going. Because it was hard. But I did want to mention this, that not a day goes by that we don't mention my dad. Even though Jet and Maverick have not met him, they still know who Opa is. They have pictures of him in the house. We still talk about him like they knew him. So I think if you do have a loved one that's passed, that's an important thing, is just to keep their memory going. Because I feel like they do have a personal connection to him, even though none of them really met him. So okay, moving on to the next one. And I'll bring up my dad in this one too. Fun fact about my boys is I have 3 boys, 2 with blue eyes and 1 with brown. My husband and I have green and he has brown. So neither of us have blue eyes, but 2 of my kids turned out with blue eyes, which I just think is genetically really fun. Like, I just think that's a fun fact. But my dad had blue eyes. So despite like all the recessive genes and, my husband having brown, total, just like brown eyes on his side of the family, that blue really came through in those boys. So I just think it's so cool. Still wish one of mine had my green eyes. None of them got it. I kind of thought Jet would for a while because his did not turn brown for a very long time. Like Ronin's, it was pretty clear. They all have blue when they're born, but Ronin's, it was like, okay, yours are blue. Jet for a while were kind of like hazily. So I was like, ooh, they're going to be blue, but they are brown eyes, but they're the most beautiful. I tell them all the time, you have the most beautiful brown eyes. So that's fun. Okay. Last thing that I want to share about myself, see if anyone else can connect here, is I'm a big Pride and Prejudice fan, Jane Austen fan. I love that. I am a huge fan of the Pride and Prejudice movie with Keira Knightley, but I don't know if any of you had ever seen the BBC like 6-hour series that came out, gosh, maybe in the 90s. Huge fan of that. I have watched it a million times. Love it. I have read a couple of the books. I do remember in high school, we had to read Pride and Prejudice for high school. And in my lit class, because I had seen that series so much. The series is literally like word for word, the book. And because I had read it or watched it so much, like reading it was really easy. And I remember one day the teacher was like asking questions and I'm like, I know all these answers, but I don't want to raise my hand anymore. So she goes, if someone does not answer this question, you are all getting double homework. And so I raised my hand and answered the question because I was like, I know this book back and forwards, like by heart. I could recite half the lines. Well, it was a little embarrassing because she was like, okay, everyone thank Katie for answering that because now you don't have homework. I was mortified. I was so shy in high school. So doing that was like, oh my gosh. But also I was like, you guys, how do you not love Pride and Prejudice? So any other Jane Austen fans out there, hit me up. Okay, I hope that gave you a little bit of some insights into me, your host that you hear every week. I know mostly you're hearing from my guests, but this was a little way to get to know me. If there was anything surprised you or that you connect with me on, I would love for you to send me a message. You can find my email in the description below. You can find me on social media. I want to hear from you. So Thank you for letting me share about myself. I'll be back next week with another interview. But until that time, I want to remind you that everyone burns their first pancake, so just keep flipping.